A rich man stared into his daughter's eyes and said nothing, just lifted her over the bridge railing and let go. No tears, no mercy. The 6-year-old's scream was swallowed by the river below. But as her body fell, something incredible happened. Me too. Unexpected. So impossible. You'll question everything you believe about instinct, love, and who the real hero is. What would drive a father to do this? And how can a horse know when a human heart breaks? Let me know what you think of this story. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Watch to the end because I have a little gift for you there. And now, go back to this story to see how it goes. The polished gleam of the mahogany table in the Beaumont Corporation's executive boardroom reflected the anxious faces of the assembled partners. Victor Beaumont, a man whose tailored suit and confident air usually commanded any room, was mid-presentation, his voice a smooth baritone, laying out the projections for a multi-hundred-million-dollar development. Beside him, his strategic advisor and fiancée, Isabella Rossi, watched with a predatory stillness. Suddenly, a small, clear voice cut through the corporate jargon. "Daddy, those numbers aren't right." All heads swiveled towards Grace, Victor's 8-year-old daughter, perched on a chair slightly too big for her, a notepad filled with meticulous figures in her lap. Her brow was furrowed in concentration. Victor's smile faltered, a micro-expression of annoyance flickering before it was smoothed away. "Grace, honey, we're in a very important meeting." "But they're wrong," she insisted, her gaze earnest and unwavering. "You said 73. 5% of 242 million is 193 million. It's not. It's 177. 800%. Not one's nothing. And the profit margin you're showing for the Azure Creek residences. How can a project have a projected gross profit margin of 132% on total capital investment within a single fiscal year? That's economically improbable. Even with optimistic market conditions, the projected material costs also seem significantly underestimated given current inflation and supply chain. A stunned silence descended upon the room. The partners exchanged uneasy glances. Isabella managed a strained, saccharine smile. Such a charming childhood imagination, isn't it? Always playing with numbers. But one of the investors, a grizzled man named Henderson, known for his hawk-eyed scrutiny, leaned forward. "Actually," he said, his voice dry, "I'd like to see those base calculations again. Beaumont, perhaps we should have our own auditors take a closer look at this entire prospectus before we proceed." The atmosphere in the room plummeted from strained to icy. The colossal deal teetered on the brink of collapse. Worse, the specter of a full-scale fraud investigation loomed, threatening to dismantle Victor's empire. Later, in Victor's private office, the door shut firmly behind them. Isabella's composure shattered. "That girl," she hissed, her voice like a viper's, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the leather of the armchair. "She's a ticking time bomb. Victor, her freakish intelligence will bury us both. It was my strategy, my numbers that were supposed to secure our future." Her eyes, usually a cool, calculating blue, blazed with fury. "You have to choose. Vugusher. It's your career, your reputation, our future, everything we've worked for. And me. Or it's her. There isn't room for both in the life we're building." Isabella's leverage was clear, a past misdeed of Victor's, perhaps a secret concerning Grace's deceased mother. Maria, or an earlier, equally dubious business venture, held tight in her manipulative grip. She knew his ambition, his fear of ruin. The biting wind whipped around Victor Beaumont as he stood on the old iron bridge spanning the tumultuous, slate-gray waters of the Etheria River. His face was a mask of glacial resolve, the earlier charm and confidence stripped away to reveal something cold and desperate beneath. Grace, her small body trembling, clung to him, tears streaming down her face, etching clean paths through the grime smudged on her cheeks from an earlier, happier moment playing in the garden. "Daddy, please," she sobbed, her voice thin and reedy against the roar of the current below. "I promise I won't talk about the numbers anymore. I promise I'll be quiet. I'll do anything. Don't leave me. Please don't do this." Her small hands clutched at the expensive fabric of his overcoat. A desperate, futile anchor. Victor's gaze was distant, fixed on the churning water. He looked down at her, not with hatred, but with a chillingly detached sort of despair. "You're just like your mother, Maria," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind, laced with a profound bitterness, always so honest, so damned naively pure. "And always in my way." Then, with a horrifyingly deliberate movement, he lifted her over the cold, rusted railing. Grace's shriek, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror, was abruptly swallowed by the river's maw as he released his grip. He watched for a moment as the small figure disappeared into the frothing chaos, then turned, his shoulders hunched, and walked back towards his waiting car, the sound of its engine a jarring intrusion in the sudden, awful silence. From the dense thicket lining the riverbank, unseen, a pair of intelligent, amber eyes had witnessed the entire, monstrous act. Cooper, a magnificent Rottweiler, powerfully built and radiating an almost leonine majesty, had been exploring, perhaps having strayed from a nearby walk with an owner, or maybe he was one of the valley's solitary wanderers, a dog with a past hinted at by the faded K9 unit insignia on his worn collar. A ferocious volley of barks ripped from his chest as Victor Beaumont drove away, the sound echoing with an undeniable accusation. The moment the car was out of sight, Cooper didn't hesitate. With a speed and agility that belied his size, he scrambled down the steep, muddy bank, his gaze locked on the spot where Grace had vanished. Reaching the water's edge, he launched himself into the icy torrent with an extraordinary, powerful leap, disappearing beneath the waves for a heart-stopping moment before resurfacing, already paddling with focused determination. The river was a maelstrom, its currents treacherous and unforgiving. Cooper, battling the frigid, relentless pull, swam with astonishing power and precision, his great head held high. Scanning the turbulent surface, he spotted her, a small, dark shape, flailing weakly, her bright pink jacket a fleeting splash of color against the gray. Grace was already succumbing to the shock and the biting cold, her struggles becoming feebler. With a final surge of effort, Cooper reached her. Grace, in the primal throes of panic, latched onto him, her desperate hands tangling in his thick fur, her fingers instinctively finding purchase on his sturdy collar. He grunted, the added weight and her desperate, uncoordinated movements making his task exponentially harder. But he did not falter. He turned, his powerful legs churning, his focus absolute. Get this child to safety. Further downstream, Agnes Albright, a woman whose silver hair was often tucked under a gardening hat, and whose keen eyes had seen more of the world's underbelly in her years as a retired investigative journalist than most, was out for her evening constitutional. She often walked Cooper, her loyal companion, along this stretch, but today he'd bounded off ahead with unusual energy. Now, she peered through the gathering dusk, a frown creasing her brow. "Cooper, Cooper, you rascal," she called. Then she saw it. A large, dark form struggling at the river's edge, dragging something onto the muddy bank. A strangled cry escaped her lips. "Oh, dear Lord." Cooper, the child. She scrambled down the embankment, her heart hammering against her ribs. Cooper, panting, exhausted but resolute, was nudging a small, sodden form further onto the land. Whining softly, Grace lay limp, shivering uncontrollably, her lips tinged blue, her clothes plastered to her tiny frame. She was barely conscious, but as Agnes knelt beside her, her large, intelligent eyes, though clouded with trauma and cold, fluttered open. They fixed on Cooper with an almost preternatural trust and profound gratitude before drifting closed again. Agnes, her movements swift and practical despite her age, was already stripping off her own warm cardigan to wrap around the child. "Hold on, little one," she murmured, her voice a mixture of horror and reassurance. As she gently checked for injuries, her experienced eyes noted bruises on Grace's arms and wrists, some yellowish and fading, others a more angry purple. They didn't look like they came from being tossed about by the river. And the fear, the deep, ingrained fear that flickered in the child's eyes when Agnes had first reached for her. It was a fear of adults, profound and unsettling. She managed to get Grace back to her cozy, slightly cluttered farmhouse, a haven smelling of old books, dried herbs, and the comforting aroma of wood smoke. Cooper, after a vigorous shake that sent water spraying everywhere, refused to leave Grace's side, settling down like a furry, warm sentinel beside the old armchair where Agnes had gently placed the child. Wrapped in a thick quilt, as Grace slowly regained some warmth and coherence, she remained mostly silent, her wide, intelligent gaze missing nothing the way the grandfather clock in the hall ticked with a reassuring rhythm. The precise arrangement of Agnes's collected river stones on the mantelpiece, the pattern of the worn oriental rug. She clutched a corner of the quilt, her knuckles white. When Agnes offered her warm broth, she took it with trembling hands, her eyes darting nervously towards the door, then to Cooper, finding solace in his steadfast presence. Later, as Grace regained a little strength, her extraordinary mind began to surface through the trauma. In a quiet, hesitant voice, she described to Agnes the exact make, model, and even a partial license plate number of Victor's car. She pointed out minute details of the pattern on the bridge's ironwork. One afternoon, while Agnes was in the kitchen, she found Grace had rearranged her collection of river stones, not randomly, but into a complex, mathematically perfect spiral sequence. The true depth of her trauma, however, revealed itself unexpectedly. A sudden, sharp clap of thunder, a prelude to an evening storm, sent her into a paroxysm of terror. She curled into a tight ball on the floor, rocking back and forth, her small body rigid, a stream of prime numbers, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, spilled from her lips, a desperate, whispered mantra against the encroaching fear. Cooper, whining softly, pressed his great head against her, a tangible anchor in her internal storm, licking away the tears that now flowed freely. Agnes watched, her heart aching, a grim suspicion solidifying in her mind. There was the faintest resemblance, she thought, around the eyes, to a woman she'd once interviewed for a story years ago, a brilliant, principled architect named Maria, who had died too young. This child, with her haunted eyes and astonishing intellect. Something was terribly wrong about what had happened to her, something that went far beyond a simple, tragic accident. And Cooper, this brave, intuitive dog, had somehow known it from the very start. The farmhouse, nestled in the quiet valley, became a fragile sanctuary, but miles away, in the steely heart of New York City, the architect of Grace's terror, Victor Beaumont, returned to a life that felt increasingly hollow. His lavish penthouse apartment, usually a symbol of his success, now seemed like a gilded cage. He moved through its opulent rooms with a pallor that no expensive suit could hide. The image of Grace's small face, her desperate plea, and the unforgiving river replaying in an endless, tormenting loop in his mind. Sleep offered no respite, only vivid nightmares of a churning, dark water and a child's fading cry. Isabella Rossi however, was a portrait of icy composure. While Victor wrestled with a conscience he thought long dead, she moved with chilling efficiency to erase Grace's existence. "We need a convincing cover story. Victor," she stated, her voice devoid of any discernible emotion as she sipped her morning espresso. The city's glittering skyline, a backdrop to her cold calculations. Grace will be transferred to a leading specialized boarding school in Europe, one equipped to handle her particular health needs and unique intellectual gifts. All necessary documentation, including fabricated medical records and school enrollment forms, will be meticulously prepared. No one, absolutely no one, can have an inkling of suspicion. She had already taken steps, her network of discreet, amoral contacts ensuring Victor was closely monitored. His calls, his meetings, even his solitary brooding, were likely under her surveillance. Seeing him flinch at a sudden noise one evening, his hand trembling as he reached for a glass of scotch, Isabella's eyes narrowed. "Don't be weak, Victor," she warned, her tone like a shard of glass. "That child, with her transcendent but uncontrollable mind, has no place in this world, and certainly no place in our plans. She was a liability, a flaw in the system. We've merely rectified it. Consider the weed pulled, root and stem." Back at Agnes Albright's farm, the passing days brought a slow, tentative thawing in Grace. Agnes, with her gentle patience, noticed more and more of the familiar in the child. A certain tilt of the head when concentrating, a way of looking up through her lashes that tugged at a distant memory. As Grace began to feel a sliver of safety, she'd share fragmented whispers about her mother. "Maria. Mommy Maria used to sing a song about a bluebird. It had a broken wing, but it learned to fly higher than all the others." She might murmur, her gaze distant, or, "I had a wooden horse. Its paint was chipped, but Mommy said that meant it was loved very much." Agnes, her investigative instincts honed by years of chasing stories, began to quietly piece things together. The name, Beaumont, the child's exceptional intellect, the fear that clung to her like a second skin. She started making discreet inquiries through old, trusted contacts from her journalism days, carefully probing into Victor Beaumont's empire, particularly a shadowy entity Grace had once mentioned in a hushed, fearful tone. Phoenix Holdings. One afternoon, while Agnes was watching the evening news, a brief segment featured Victor Beaumont attending a charity gala. The moment his polished, smiling face appeared on screen, followed by the equally composed image of Isabella at his side. Grace, who had been quietly drawing at the kitchen table, let out a small, choked gasp. Her crayon clattered to the floor, her breath hitched, and her eyes widened in terror. Cooper, sensing her distress instantly, was on his feet, a low, guttural growl rumbling in his chest as he moved to stand between Grace and the television screen, his body a protective shield. Agnes quickly switched off the set, her own suspicions deepening with every passing day. That night, the city and the countryside presented a stark contrast. In his sterile, luxurious bedroom, Victor tossed and turned, haunted by the accusing eyes of his daughter in the relentless replay of his nightmares. Isabella, in the adjoining suite, slept soundly, her mind already strategizing the next moves for their vast, often morally ambiguous, financial ventures. But in the small, lamplit bedroom at Agnes's farmhouse, Grace, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, slept deeply and peacefully. One small hand resting on Cooper's thick fur, the dog's rhythmic breathing a comforting presence beside her bed. The following morning, the old rotary phone in Agnes's hallway jangled to life. It was Eleanor Vance, Agnes's older sister, her voice thin and strained with anxiety. "Agnes, I had the dream again," Eleanor stammered, her distress palpable even through the crackling line. The little girl, with the reddish glint in her hair, Just like my Maria's when she was small. She's in such peril by a great, dark water, and there's a dog, a big, dark dog, so brave, trying to save her. But I'm so afraid. Agnes, I keep waking up with this terrible feeling that something is dreadfully wrong. Eleanor's dreams had been a recurring torment for weeks, filled with disturbingly specific details: the color of the child's jacket, the roar of the water, the desperate struggle. These details, which Eleanor tearfully recounted, resonated with an eerie precision to the fragmented, fearful whispers Grace had shared with Agnes. Unable to bear the weight of her premonitions any longer, Eleanor announced, "I'm coming down. Agnes, I have to." When Eleanor's old sedan finally pulled into the driveway later that afternoon, Agnes was on the porch. Grace, feeling a little more adventurous, was in the side yard, attempting to teach Cooper to fetch a slightly deflated ball. Her laughter, though still fragile, a welcome sound. As Eleanor stepped out of the car, her gaze fell upon the child. She stopped dead, her hand flying to her mouth, a low gasp escaping her. "Oh, my God," she whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning, overwhelming emotion. She took a faltering step forward, her finger trembling as she pointed. "Agnes, that child, her hair, the way she smiles even now. She's the spitting image, the absolute spitting image of my Maria when she was that age, especially those eyes. My Maria's eyes." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face as she stumbled towards the porch, Agnes rushing to support her. Inside, over cups of chamomile tea, Eleanor, her voice thick with unshed grief and renewed pain, recounted the story of her daughter, Maria, a bright, spirited young woman who had fallen for a charismatic, ambitious, yet undeniably enigmatic young businessman named Victor Beaumont. Maria's unexpected pregnancy, the stark differences in their backgrounds, and then the devastating news Maria had died in a tragic accident shortly after giving birth. The baby, Grace, had been handed over to Victor. Eleanor had always harbored a deep, gnawing suspicion that there was more to Maria's death, a darkness Victor had carefully concealed. Grace, who had quietly entered the room, drawn by the raw emotion in Eleanor's voice, sensed the older woman's profound sadness and a strange, inexplicable warmth. She had been mostly silent for days, speaking only in short, hesitant sentences. Now, she slowly approached Eleanor, her gaze fixed on a faded, intricately embroidered shawl draped over the back of Eleanor's chair. She reached out a small finger and gently touched a tiny, embroidered snowflake. "Grandma." The word was soft, tentative, yet it hung in the air with an incredible weight. This scarf, it has 42 tiny blue silk threads sewn into each snowflake point, and there are 7 snowflakes across the border. Her voice, though still a child's, held an unnerving precision. "My mommy Maria, she had a scarf. It looked just like this one. She said her mommy made it for her." Eleanor choked back a sob, her eyes flying to the shawl, then back to Grace. It was true. She had embroidered that shawl for Maria, a labor of love, counting every stitch, weaving in those tiny blue threads as a secret symbol of hope. The detail Grace had recalled was impossibly, miraculously accurate. Tears flowed freely now. Tears of grief, of shock, but also of a burgeoning, fierce joy. She pulled Grace into a trembling embrace. "Oh, my child, my sweet child," she wept. "It is you. You are my granddaughter." The fragile peace of their discovery was shattered a few days later. An evening business program flickered on Agnes's television. There, looking every bit the successful, benevolent tycoon, was Victor Beaumont, Isabella Rossi, cool and elegant by his side. He was giving an interview, his expression one of carefully crafted paternal pride. As a father, Victor said, his voice smooth and resonant, I only want what's best for my Grace. She's an exceptionally gifted child, and the specialized academy she's attending in Switzerland offers an environment where her unique talents can be nurtured to their fullest potential. It's the finest institution of its kind. Isabella added, her smile perfectly calibrated for the camera. We believe this tailored, secure environment is crucial for children who require such specialized attention and, frankly, protection. It ensures both their optimal development and their safety. Grace, who had been looking at a picture book with Cooper's head in her lap, froze. Her eyes locked onto the screen. The initial flicker of fear was quickly consumed by a rising tide of indignation. A spark of the fight that had been so brutally suppressed. She scrambled to her feet, her small finger jabbing towards the television. Lies, she cried, her voice ringing with a sudden, startling strength. It's all lies. He didn't take me to any school. He threw me in the river. He tried to make me go away. And her, she pointed at Isabella. She's a bad person. She told him to. Their numbers are all fake. All of them. The outburst was a dam breaking, fueled by a desperate need for the truth to be known. Grace, drawing on her phenomenal eidetic memory, began to pour out a torrent of information. She grabbed paper and crayons and began to draw, not childish pictures, but astonishingly detailed recreations of organizational charts she'd glimpsed in Victor's office, flowcharts of financial transactions, even mimicking signatures on documents she'd seen on his desk or computer screen related to Phoenix Holdings. This money, she explained, tracing a complex path on her drawing for Agnes and Eleanor, her small face alight with focused intensity. It doesn't go from account A in this bank to account C in that offshore company. It can't. It has to go through a shell company. B, C, but they don't show B. And this signature here, on this red folder document for Phoenix Holdings, it's not like Daddy's real signature on my old school permission slips. I saw Ms. Isabella give Daddy a special kind of pen, a very thin silver one, just before he signed this one. His hand was shaking a little. Agnes and Eleanor exchanged a stunned, grave look. Agnes, her journalistic instincts firing on all cylinders, felt a cold dread mixed with a reporter's grim recognition. Phoenix Holdings, she murmured, the name clicking into place with chilling significance. I've heard that name before. It was whispered in connection with a massive money laundering investigation years ago, one that went cold. This isn't just about child abandonment or cruelty. Eleanor, if what Grace is saying is true, and I believe every word, Victor and Isabella wanted her gone because she's a living, breathing witness to systematic, large-scale financial fraud. Isabella, she's not just an advisor, she's likely the mastermind. They understood then. Grace wasn't just a tragically discarded child. She was a data error in Victor and Isabella's meticulously constructed criminal enterprise, a tiny witness who held the key to unraveling their entire empire of deceit. Grace looked from Agnes to Eleanor, her eyes, so like her mother Maria's, filled with a new, unwavering resolve. Numbers never lie, she stated, her voice clear and firm, echoing the profound, simple truth that had nearly cost her her life. Only people make them lie, and I remember all their numbers, every single one. The weight of Grace's final words. I remember all their numbers, every single one, hung in the quiet farmhouse, a testament to her incredible mind and a chilling indictment of Victor and Isabella. For Agnes and Eleanor, the path ahead, though fraught with danger, was now undeniably clear. They had to protect this child and expose the darkness that had almost consumed her. Meanwhile, in the sterile, high-tech fortress of her New York command center, Isabella's true office, far from the Beaumont Corporation's public facade, alarms were beginning to flash. Victor, increasingly erratic and consumed by a toxic cocktail of guilt, fear, and alcohol, had become a liability. His hushed, desperate phone calls to old, estranged family members, his sudden, inexplicable trips out of the city under flimsy pretenses, and his increasingly agitated demeanor had not gone unnoticed by Isabella's intricate network of surveillance. Then came the financial tremor, a discreet flag from an overseas bank about an account linked to a long-dormant shell company. An account Isabella knew Victor had no reason or authority to access. It was a small amount, almost insignificant, but it was the pattern, the deviation, that alerted her, putting the pieces together with terrifying speed. Victor's instability, the unusual financial probe, the geographic triangulation of his unauthorized excursions pointing towards a remote valley, Isabella arrived at an unthinkable conclusion. Grace was alive. The child, the one error she thought permanently deleted, was not only alive, but potentially with someone who could connect the dots. Every meticulously crafted lie, every layer of Phoenix Holdings' criminal enterprise, and Isabella's own carefully constructed identity were now under direct and immediate threat. She decided then, with the cold, surgical precision that defined her, that this was a mess she would have to sanitize. Personally, she couldn't trust Victor's crumbling resolve, nor could she risk exposure by dispatching underlings who might fail or, worse, talk, a sleek, black sedan, incongruous against the rustic tranquility of the valley, purred to a stop outside Agnes Albright's gate a few days later. Isabella Rossi emerged, not in her usual power suits, but in attire chosen for disarming maternalism, a soft cashmere sweater, tailored slacks, her severe hair softened into a more approachable style. In her hand, a leather briefcase. Grace was in the front yard with Cooper, her earlier fear now channeled into a quiet watchfulness. The moment Isabella stepped out of the car, a visible tremor ran through the child. She grabbed Agnes's worn cardigan, her small voice a frantic whisper. "Grandma, Grandma, it's her. That's the lady from my bad dreams. The one with the cold eyes. Cooper doesn't like her. He says her breath smells like lies." Indeed, Cooper, who had been lazily sunning himself, was instantly on his feet, a low, menacing growl vibrating deep in his chest. He moved with fluid grace, positioning himself squarely between Grace and the approaching figure. His powerful shoulders bunched, hackles subtly raised, his intelligent eyes fixed on Isabella with an unwavering, hostile stare. Agnes and Eleanor stepped onto the porch, a united front of aging but formidable resolve. Isabella approached, her smile carefully calibrated for concern and authority. "Mrs. Albright, Mrs. Vance, I'm Miss Smith from the Department of Child Well-Being. We've received a report concerning a child, Grace Beaumont, who we believe is in your care. Her father, Mr. Victor Beaumont, has filed a court order for her immediate return." She gestured with the briefcase. "I have all the necessary paperwork." Eleanor's grip tightened on the porch railing, her knuckles white. Her voice, though trembling, carried the steely edge of a mother's fury. "You've come for the child, haven't you?" she said, her gaze boring into Isabella's, just like someone came for my Maria all those years ago. "You think we don't know who you are?" "Isabella Rossi." Eleanor spat the name. "Or perhaps," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, dangerous level, "I should use another name, one tied more directly to the unfortunate past of your Phoenix Holdings. Perhaps a name like Katerina Vogel." Isabella's smile faltered, a flicker of something cold and venomous in her eyes before she quickly composed herself. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. My name is Smith, and I am here on official business." "Oh, I don't think we are mistaken. Miss Vogel," Agnes interjected, her own voice calm but laced with iron. Her research, jump-started by Grace's revelations and her own dusty contacts, had unearthed a shadowy past, a brilliant, ruthless operative known as Katharina Vogel, implicated in several high-stakes European financial scandals and a corporate espionage case involving the suspicious death of a key witness, before vanishing completely, only for Isabella Rossi to emerge years later in New York, an eminence grise in Beaumont's world. The patterns are all there: the meticulous planning, the ruthless efficiency, the ability to make inconvenient people disappear. Isabella's composure was visibly cracking, a vein throbbing at her temple. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're obstructing a legal process. Now, if you'll just hand over the child. It was then, as Isabella took a step forward, her hand reaching out as if to beckon Grace, that the child's clear, unwavering voice cut through the tense standoff. You told the man with the dragon tattoo on his neck that the little songbird will never sing again. Her file will be permanently sealed along with Maria's secret. Grace's eyes, unnervingly perceptive, were fixed on Isabella. He asked if the package from Etheria was secured. You said, "The river keeps its promises." I heard you. You were in Daddy's hidden room, the one behind the big bookshelf. I saw the light under the door. I remember everything. Isabella froze, her face draining of color. The hidden room, the dragon tattoo, the specific, coded phrases, these were details no outsider could possibly know. They were from a highly encrypted communication about the contingency plan for Maria, should she ever have become a threat. A plan reactivated for Grace. She stared at the child, for the first time seeing not a nuisance, but a terrifyingly accurate recording device. Grace had even, Agnes later found, drawn a remarkably precise layout of that secret room, complete with the location of a hidden safe and the unique pattern of the keypad. As if summoned by the escalating drama, the crunch of tires on gravel announced another arrival, a town car, not as sleek as Isabella's, but driven with a desperate urgency, skidded to a halt. Victor Beaumont stumbled out, his face ashen, his eyes bloodshot and wild. He had, finally, in a moment of alcohol-fueled remorse and a desperate call to an old family lawyer who had, in turn, discreetly contacted Agnes, decided to face the monster he had allowed to control him. He had come to find his daughter, to beg for a forgiveness he didn't deserve. His gaze fell upon Isabella, then to Grace, flanked protectively by Agnes, Eleanor, and the still growling Cooper. The scene before him, Isabella's menacing presence, the raw fear in Grace's eyes now mixed with a defiant courage. The steely resolve of the two older women was a horrifying tableau of his own making. "Isabella, what are you doing here?" he stammered, his voice hoarse. Isabella, cornered, her mask of civility shattered, turned on him, her face contorted with a venomous rage. "Cleaning up your mess. You incompetent fool," she shrieked. "The one thing you were supposed to handle. She knows." "Victor," Eleanor said, her voice heavy with accusation. "She knows what you did, what she made you do. She knows about Phoenix Holdings. She knows about Katharina Vogel." Victor stared at Isabella, a dawning horror in his eyes. "Katharina, that was you." The name was from a dark, whispered chapter of his family's past. A disavowed, illegitimate half-sister, brilliant and resentful, cast out years ago, who had supposedly vanished. Isabella threw back her head and laughed, a chilling, unhinged sound that echoed in the quiet yard. "Yes, dear brother, it was all me." Surprise. Her eyes glittered with a manic triumph. "You Beaumonts, with your insufferable pride and your stolen fortunes, and that sanctimonious, naive Maria, who thought she could outsmart me, who almost exposed everything. You all had to pay, And you, Victor, she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. You were the easiest of them all, a pathetic, ambition-riddled puppet, dancing on my strings. Her eyes darted towards Grace, a murderous glint within them. But this little anomaly, she'll ruin everything. Isabella lunged, not towards Victor, but towards Grace, her hand reaching out, fingers curled like talons. Before anyone could react, Cooper exploded into action. With a roar that was pure, protective fury, he launched himself at Isabella, not to maul, but to intercept. He slammed into her side, knocking her off balance, his teeth snapping inches from the hand that had reached for Grace. Isabella shrieked, stumbling backward, dropping her pristine leather briefcase. It burst open on impact, its contents spilling onto the grass. Not just legal documents, but also a small, metallic USB drive and a slim, silenced pistol. Isabella scrambled for the gun, but Victor, galvanized by a desperate surge of paternal instinct he thought long dead, finally moved. He tackled her, a clumsy, desperate lunge, and they both went down in a heap. Amidst the chaos, Grace, her small face pale but set with determination, pointed to a small, almost forgotten object that had also spilled from the briefcase, a child's plush toy, a little bluebird with one slightly misshapen wing, identical to the one she had described her mother singing about. It must have been something Isabella had callously kept, perhaps from Maria's belongings. That's my listen birdie, Grace exclaimed. Mommy Maria gave it to me. She said it would always keep her secrets safe. She darted forward, snatched the toy, and fumbled with a small, almost invisible seam near its tail. Her tiny fingers, surprisingly nimble, found a tiny, hard switch within the plush. She pressed it, a faint whirring, then a voice. Maria Beaumont's voice, clear and sweet, but laced with an undeniable fear, recorded years ago. Isabella, I know it's you. I know what you're doing with Phoenix Holdings. The laundering, the threats. Victor is blind to it, but I'm not. If anything happens to me, or to my baby, this recording, and the ledgers I've copied, they will find their way out. I've made sure of it. The recording continued, detailing specific transactions, dates, and coded names. A damning indictment spoken from beyond the grave. Isabella, struggling under Victor, let out a howl of pure, unadulterated fury and defeat. Grace looked at her, then at her father, tears welling in her eyes, but her voice steady. This is what she did, she said, clutching the bluebird. The numbers. They didn't lie. And Mommy's listen birdie. It remembered, too. And Cooper, she added, her gaze softening as she looked at the brave Rottweiler who now stood panting beside her. His eyes still wary, but his growl subsided to a low rumble. Cooper never forgets the scent of a bad person. Never. What did you think of today's story? If it made your day, drop a good in the comments. If it didn't hit the mark, just type 1. Got your own thoughts? I'd love to hear them below. And hey, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's free, and it really helps the channel grow. Thank you so much for being here. The chilling echo of Maria Beaumont's voice, emanating from the unassuming plush bluebird clutched in Grace's small hand, served as the final, damning chorus to Isabella Rossi's reign of terror. Pinned beneath Victor, who now seemed to possess a desperate, newfound strength, Isabella or Katerina Vogel, as the specter of her past now fully materialized, could only emit a strangled sound, a guttural mix of thwarted rage and the bitter taste of absolute defeat. The intricate, decades-long symphony of deceit she had so masterfully conducted had reached its cacophonous end, unraveled by the extraordinary mind of a child, the undying love of a mother reaching from beyond the grave, and the unwavering, courageous loyalty of a magnificent Rottweiler. The wail of sirens, which had been a growing, ominous crescendo in the background, now exploded into the tranquil country air as multiple law enforcement vehicles screeched to a halt, disgorging a small army of federal agents and local police onto Agnes Albright's normally peaceful property. Agnes, her journalistic instincts never truly dormant, had placed a discreet but urgent call to an old, highly placed contact within the Justice Department the moment Isabella's carefully constructed facade had begun to irrevocably crack. The yard, moments before a stage for desperate confrontation, transformed into a meticulously managed crime scene. Officers, their movements sharp and purposeful, fanned out. Isabella, her face a mask of stony fury, was hauled to her feet, the expensive cashmere sweater now askew, her carefully styled hair disheveled. As the cold steel of handcuffs snapped around her wrists, she spat out venomous threats about lawsuits and powerful attorneys, but the words lacked their usual chilling conviction, sounding hollow even against the chirping of oblivious crickets. One agent carefully bagged the discarded pistol, another the scattered contents of the briefcase, his gloved hands gently retrieving the crucial USB drive that Cooper, with an intelligence that continued to astound, had nudged protectively towards Agnes amidst the preceding chaos. The "Listen, Birdie," still whispering fragments of Maria's story, was treated with the reverence of a sacred artifact. Victor Beaumont, his tailored suit a ruin of grass stains and tears, offered no resistance. His shoulders sagged. The fight, if there ever had been one against Isabella's true might, completely gone, replaced by a crushing, visible weight of shame. As an officer gently guided him towards a waiting vehicle, his gaze found Grace. Grace. He choked out, the single word thick with a universe of regret. "I am so sorry." It was a pathetically inadequate epitaph for his failures, yet in its broken sincerity, it was the first truly honest thing he had said in years. He was read his rights, his responses monosyllabic, his cooperation that of a man utterly defeated by his own demons. In the turbulent days and weeks that unfurled, the full weight of the state and federal justice systems descended upon the remnants of Phoenix Holdings. Victor, isolated in the stark, unforgiving reality of a federal detention center, underwent a painful but cathartic unburdening. His confession, delivered over many long, grueling sessions, was a torrent of self-recrimination. He detailed Isabella's insidious grooming, her brilliant, sociopathic manipulation that had begun subtly years ago, preying on his ambitions, his insecurities, his inherent weaknesses. He spoke of Maria, his voice cracking, describing her vibrant spirit, her sharp intellect, and her growing unease about Isabella's influence, an unease he had callously dismissed. He recounted, with tears streaming down his face, the horrifying events leading to Maria's accidental death, a tragedy he now understood, with chilling certainty, had been orchestrated by Isabella to remove the one person who saw through her charade and threatened to expose Phoenix Holdings prematurely. He confessed to his own monstrous act at the Etheria River, the image of Grace's terrified face seared into his memory, explaining Isabella's ultimatum, but taking full, unadulterated responsibility for his own cowardly compliance. His detailed knowledge of Phoenix Holdings' inner workings, its laundered accounts, its intimidated officials, and its brutal enforcement tactics, provided investigators with an invaluable insider's roadmap into Isabella's dark kingdom. He asked for no leniency, only for the opportunity to purge the poison from his soul, regardless of the personal cost. For Grace, the immediate aftermath was a bewildering blur of hushed adult conversations, strange new faces, and the lingering metallic taste of fear. Yet, within the sturdy, loving embrace of Agnes and Eleanor, and with Cooper as her steadfast, furry anchor, she found a fragile sanctuary. The farmhouse, with its creaking floors and scent of baking apples, became her world. She emerged as a pivotal witness in the complex proceedings against Isabella and her sprawling network. Her preternatural recall of conversations, financial figures, coded phrases, and even the layout of Victor's secret office, delivered with a child's unnerving clarity, proved devastatingly effective. Preparing for her testimony, even in closed, carefully managed sessions, was an ordeal, but she faced it with a quiet, solemn courage that left seasoned prosecutors and child advocates in awe. Eleanor and Agnes were her unwavering pillars, holding her hands, wiping her tears, and reminding her of her incredible strength. The path to healing, however, was a winding, shadowed road. Sleep became a battlefield where nightmares replayed her terrors, the cold rush of the river, Isabella's eyes like chips of ice, her father's face contorted in a mask of despair before he let her fall. The gentle lapping of the stream at the edge of Agnes's property, once a soothing lullaby, could sometimes trigger a jolt of panic. Strangers, particularly men in suits or those who spoke with abrupt authority, would cause her to shrink, her voice deserting her. Agnes and Eleanor, with boundless patience and intuitive wisdom, created a cocoon of safety and routine. They read to her for hours, baked cookies, and took gentle walks in the woods, always allowing Cooper to scout ahead or linger by Grace's side, a furry barometer of her comfort, recognizing the invisible wounds that ran deeper than any physical injury. Agnes sought out Dr. Lena Hansen, a child psychologist renowned for her innovative and empathetic approach. Dr. Hansen's office was a haven of soft colors, comfortable chairs, and, most importantly to Grace, a distinct lack of clinical sterility. When Dr. Hansen observed the profound, almost telepathic bond between Grace and Cooper, she immediately knew he would be an integral part of the healing process. Grace, Dr. Hansen said during their first session, her voice a soothing balm, while Cooper lay sprawled contentedly at Grace's feet, his chin resting on her sneaker. Cooper isn't just a dog, is he? He's your guardian, your best friend, the keeper of your brave heart. I think he can help us teach those scary feelings to use a quieter voice. And so, Cooper became Dr. Hansen's most valued co-therapist. In their sessions, Grace would often speak through Cooper, whispering her fears into his soft fur, detailing the shadowy figures that populated her nightmares. Cooper, in turn, would offer a reassuring lick, a gentle lean of his warm body, or simply meet her gaze with his steady, knowing amber eyes. Dr. Hansen guided Grace through gentle exposure therapy. They'd start by drawing pictures of rivers, with Cooper's paw signing his approval on the less threatening ones. Later, they'd watch videos of calm streams, Cooper's rhythmic breathing, a calming soundtrack. Eventually, these sessions progressed to short, supervised visits to the farm's gentle brook, Grace tossing sticks for Cooper, her laughter, tentative at first, then freer, mingling with the water's murmur. He was her bridge back to trust, his unwavering presence a testament to the existence of good in a world that had shown her so much darkness. From the desolate confines of his cell, awaiting the inevitable pronouncements of justice, Victor poured his tormented soul into letters addressed to Grace. Penned on thin, government-issue paper, each word seemed etched with the acid of his regret. Grace, my beloved daughter. One letter began, the script an unsteady testament to his inner turmoil. Each syllable I force onto this page feels like another twist of the knife in a heart that deserves every ounce of this agony. I allowed Isabella's insidious darkness, a darkness that found fertile ground in my own grotesque ambition, my insatiable greed, and an ocean of cowardice, to utterly extinguish the light of love I should have fiercely guarded for you and for your extraordinary mother, Maria. Maria was pure, untainted goodness. Grace, And I, in my blindness, chose the shadows. I dare not, presume to ask for your forgiveness now. It is a sacred gift I forfeited any right to the moment I betrayed you both. But I pray, a desperate, broken man's prayer, that in some distant future, you might find it in your magnificent heart to allow me even the smallest opportunity to demonstrate that this remorse, this soul-crushing regret, is as real and as permanent as the scars I have inflicted upon your young life. He filled pages with memories of Maria, her infectious laugh, her passionate belief in justice, the way her eyes would sparkle when she sketched designs for affordable, beautiful housing, dreams Isabella had systematically mocked and belittled. He confessed how Isabella, his own kin, had expertly manipulated him, twisting his perceptions, feeding his vanity, isolating him from Maria's grounding influence until he viewed his brilliant wife not as his partner, but as an impediment to the empire Isabella promised him. At first, Grace couldn't bring herself to touch the letters. The sight of her father's familiar handwriting on the stark envelopes was a visceral reminder of her trauma. She would leave them on the kitchen table, untouched, until Agnes or Eleanor quietly moved them to her desk. Cooper, with his uncanny intuition, would sometimes approach her desk, gently nudge a letter with his wet nose, and then look up at Grace with an expression that seemed to say, "It's okay. We can face this." One rainy afternoon, cocooned in a quilt with Cooper pressed against her side, she finally picked one up. Her small hands trembled as she unfolded the thin paper. Then she read another and another. The ache in her chest was a constant, dull throb. But as she absorbed the raw, unfiltered anguish in his words, a microscopic fissure appeared in the wall of her pain. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but a nascent flicker of understanding for the broken, flawed man her father had become, and perhaps a whisper of hope for the man he was so desperately trying to be. The trial of Isabella Rossi, alias Katharina Vogel, was a legal spectacle, dissected by a ravenous media. The prosecution, armed with Grace's crystalline testimony, the haunting recording of Maria's voice, Victor's exhaustive confession, and the irrefutable digital evidence recovered from the USB drive, which meticulously detailed Phoenix Holdings' global network of shell companies. Illicit transactions and brutal enforcement tactics presented an unassailable case. Isabella, defiant to the end, was found guilty on a raft of charges, including massive financial fraud, racketeering, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. An additional indictment for her role in Maria Beaumont's death was already in motion. The sentence handed down was effectively a life term, ensuring that Katharina Vogel's poisonous influence would remain confined within prison walls. The formidable, shadowy edifice of Phoenix Holdings crumbled into dust, its illicitly gained assets seized and, where possible, redirected to victims or charitable causes. Victor Beaumont, too, faced the solemn judgment of the court. He stood stoically as he pleaded guilty to all charges pertaining to his criminal negligence, his role in the attempted murder of his daughter, and his willing participation, however coerced he claimed, in the illegal activities of Phoenix Holdings. His profound and public remorse, coupled with his extensive cooperation, which had proven instrumental in dismantling Isabella's network, were acknowledged by the presiding judge. He received a lengthy prison sentence, one that reflected the profound betrayal of his paternal duties and his societal obligations. Yet it was significantly less than Isabella's, offering a distant possibility of life beyond bars. With the legal storms having passed, Grace's life began to settle into a new, quieter rhythm. The formalities were completed, and Agnes Albright and Eleanor Vance were officially appointed as her legal guardians. The cozy farmhouse, with its sprawling gardens, sunlit kitchen, and the constant, reassuring presence of Cooper, was unequivocally her home, her sanctuary. "I don't ever want to go back to that big, cold house in the city," Grandma Agnes, Grandma Eleanor, Grace declared one crisp autumn evening as they sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. Cooper lay at their feet, his tail thumping a contented rhythm against the wooden planks. That place. It's filled with too many sad memories, too many whispers of lies and fear. I want to stay right here, with you both, and with Cooper. This is where I belong. I think Mommy Maria would be happy for me here. A few days before, Victor was scheduled to be transferred to a federal penitentiary to begin serving his sentence. A brief, carefully supervised meeting was arranged in a quiet, neutral room. Grace, after many long, soul-searching conversations with Dr. Hanson and with the loving, non-judgmental support of her grandmothers, had agreed to it. The Victor Beaumont who entered was a stark contrast to the arrogant, powerful magnate the world had once known. He was gaunt, his expensive suit replaced by standard prison attire, his eyes shadowed with sleeplessness and an enduring sorrow. Yet within their depths, a fragile light of humility had been kindled. He didn't offer platitudes or seek absolution. He simply sat, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, and looked at his daughter, the child he had so catastrophically failed. Grace, he began, his voice raspy, thick with unshed tears. There are no words in any language that can ever truly undo the horror I've inflicted upon you. No apology will ever be sufficient to bridge the chasm of pain I created. He paused, his gaze dropping to his hands, then back to her face, a face so reminiscent of Maria's. If I eventually get out, he continued, the words carefully chosen, I have no intention of rebuilding any lost empire. That world is dead to me, as it should be. Instead, I want to spend whatever time I have left trying to rebuild something far more precious, something I shattered with my own hands, trust, starting with yours, Grace. If you could ever, in the fullness of time, find it within yourself to let me try. Grace listened, her expression thoughtful, her young face holding a wisdom far beyond her years. For a long, silent moment, she simply looked at him, her gaze unwavering. Then, she offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't even the full dawn of forgiveness, but it was a sliver of possibility, a tiny, courageous acknowledgement of the broken human being before her. For Victor Beaumont, it was a more precious gift than any fortune, a fragile beacon of hope in the long, penitent darkness that stretched before him. And for Grace, it was another small, brave step on her own journey toward healing, towards a future where the numbers might finally add up to peace. The small, almost imperceptible nod Grace had offered her father in that sterile visitation room years ago was not a promise of instant forgiveness, but rather the faintest glimmer of a door left infinitesimally ajar. For Victor Beaumont, incarcerated in the stark, unwelcoming confines of a federal penitentiary, that sliver of hope became his sole focus, a distant star guiding him through the long, desolate night of his atonement. Years spun by, each one a thread woven into the tapestry of Grace's becoming. The once traumatized child, haunted by the icy grip of the Etheria River and the chilling specter of Isabella Rossi's malice, blossomed under the steadfast, unconditional love of Agnes and Eleanor. The farmhouse, her sanctuary, echoed not with fear, but with the warmth of shared meals, the murmur of stories read aloud, and the comforting, rhythmic breathing of Cooper, her furry shadow, whose own coat was now distinguished by distinguished flecks of gray around his noble muzzle. Grace's extraordinary intellect, once a dangerous beacon that had nearly led to her demise, was now tempered with a profound wisdom and a deeply ingrained compassion. She still saw the world in intricate patterns of numbers and logic, but now she also saw the human equation, the variables of pain, hope, and resilience. Her therapy with Dr. Hansen, always with Cooper by her side, had helped her navigate the labyrinth of her past, not to erase the scars, but to understand them as testaments to her survival, her strength. The day Victor Beaumont walked out of prison, he was a man fundamentally altered. The sharp, tailored suits and arrogant swagger of the corporate titan were gone, replaced by the quiet, almost tentative demeanor of a man who had stared long and hard into the abyss of his own soul. His hair was now more silver than dark, his face etched with lines that spoke of sleepless nights and a heavy, unshakable burden of guilt. He carried a single, worn duffel bag and an unyielding resolve to live a life worthy of the second chance he knew he hadn't entirely earned. Their first meeting, arranged with careful consideration by Agnes and Eleanor at the familiar farmhouse, was a study in hesitant choreography. Grace, now a poised young woman on the cusp of her university studies in data science and ethics, stood on the porch, Cooper's familiar, solid presence a comforting weight against her leg. Victor approached slowly, his gaze fixed on his daughter, a maelstrom of emotions, trepidation, hope, profound remorse, swirling in his eyes. "Grace," he said, his voice raspy, unused to navigating such emotionally charged air. "Father," she replied, her tone polite, carefully neutral, yet not entirely devoid of a complex undercurrent. The years had softened the raw edges of her anger, but a guarded caution remained. Cooper, ever attuned to Grace's emotional state, let out a low, almost inaudible rumble in his chest, his intelligent eyes scrutinizing Victor. He remembered the scent of fear and betrayal from years past. But now, something was different. Victor made no sudden moves, offered no false overtures. He simply stood there, vulnerable, his sincerity a palpable aura. After a long moment, Cooper's tail gave a tentative, almost reluctant thump against the porch floor. He took a step forward, sniffed Victor's outstretched, trembling hand, and then, to everyone's surprise, nudged his great head against it briefly before returning to Grace's side. It was an absolution of sorts, a canine acknowledgement of a changed man. Victor, using the meager funds remaining after the government seizures and extensive victim restitution payments, combined with the modest earnings from prison labor he had meticulously saved, began to fulfill the promise he had made to Grace. To himself, the discussions were long, sometimes difficult, involving Grace, Agnes, and Eleanor. He laid bare his desire not for personal redemption in their eyes, but for a tangible way to counteract the darkness he had been a part of. And so, the Maria and Grace Foundation, beacon of truth and hope, was painstakingly established. Its charter was ambitious, born from the crucible of their shared experiences. The foundation wouldn't just provide aid to children from abusive or neglectful backgrounds, offering them shelter, therapy, and educational opportunities. It would also, in a nod to Agnes's investigative past and the devastating consequences of unchecked power they had all witnessed, dedicate a significant portion of its resources to funding independent, ethical investigative journalism aimed at exposing corporate malfeasance, systemic injustice, and the abuse of power. It was Victor's quiet, determined effort to ensure that the kind of darkness perpetrated by Isabella Rossi and facilitated by his own weakness would face a formidable, unyielding adversary. Grace, with her unique blend of analytical brilliance and empathetic insight, became the intellectual and ethical heart of the foundation. While pursuing her studies, she dedicated hours to meticulously reviewing grant applications, her mind sifting through complex data to identify patterns of need or potential avenues for impactful investigation. She designed innovative educational programs for at-risk youth, programs that often incorporated logic puzzles and data literacy, subtly teaching them the critical thinking skills she herself had relied upon. Her ability to see the truth hidden within tangled narratives made her an invaluable asset. Her quiet determination, a driving force. Cooper, the hero of Etheria River, became an unofficial, beloved mascot and a cornerstone of the Foundation's outreach. He earned his official therapy dog certification with flying colors. His calm, reassuring presence bringing immeasurable comfort to traumatized children during their first tentative visits to the Foundation's support center. His story, often shared by Grace or Eleanor, was a living parable of loyalty, courage, and the profound, healing connection between humans and animals. He was a tangible symbol that even in the face of terrifying adversity, a protector could emerge from the most unexpected of places. Years into its mission, the Maria and Grace Foundation achieved a landmark victory. An investigative team they had funded, working in conjunction with a tenacious local journalist Agnes had mentored, meticulously unraveled a complex scheme involving child labor exploitation within a network of unregulated garment factories. The evidence they gathered, painstakingly corroborated and analyzed, with Grace offering crucial, albeit anonymous, insights into the financial shell games involved, led to federal indictments, the liberation of dozens of vulnerable children, and significant reforms in regional labor laws. The victory was a quiet one, celebrated not with fanfare, but with a profound sense of purpose fulfilled. It was a testament to Maria's lost idealism and Grace's resilient spirit. The Foundation's 5th anniversary gala was held not in a lavish ballroom, but in the thoughtfully restored community hall of a once neglected neighborhood they had helped revitalize. The air hummed with a quiet energy, a mixture of gratitude, hope, and shared purpose. Grace, poised and articulate, stood at the podium, Cooper lying majestically at her side, his presence as natural and comforting as the warm stage lights. Victor Beaumont stood in a quiet corner at the back of the hall, no longer seeking the spotlight, content to be an observer. His gaze was fixed on his daughter, a complex tapestry of emotions playing across his features, the enduring ache of remorse for the years lost and the pain inflicted, an immense, overwhelming pride in the remarkable young woman she had become, and a quiet, deeply earned sense of peace. Grace's voice, clear and resonant, filled the hall. "My mother, Maria," she began, her eyes sweeping across the assembled guests before briefly settling on Cooper with a soft smile, "used to tell me that every number, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, possesses its own intrinsic value, its own unique story to tell. She believed that every truth, however deeply buried or deliberately obscured, will eventually, inevitably, find its way to the light." A gentle hand rested on Cooper's head as she continued, "My journey, and that of this incredible, four-legged friend beside me, is, I hope, a testament to that belief. We are here tonight, not just to mark an anniversary, but to reaffirm a fundamental principle that even after the darkest, most terrifying storms, the enduring forces of love, the unwavering strength of loyalty, and the unassailable power of truth remain the constants in our human equation. They are the stars that, if we let them, will always guide us toward a brighter, more just, and more compassionate future." The applause was heartfelt, a genuine outpouring of respect and admiration. As it subsided, Grace bent down, her arm encircling Cooper's thick neck in a warm embrace. From his place in the shadows, Victor watched, a single tear tracing a path down his weathered cheek. A tear not of sorrow, but of a profound, cathartic gratitude. Later, as the event wound down and guests mingled, Victor found himself standing near Grace as she spoke with Agnes and Eleanor. He didn't interrupt, didn't presume, but then Grace turned, her eyes meeting his. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic pronouncement. Instead, she offered him a small, almost shy smile, and he felt a warmth spread through him that no corporate success had ever provided. He reached out, his hand hesitating for a moment before gently, briefly, resting on her shoulder. It was a touch that conveyed worlds of apology, of pride, of a love, finally, painstakingly, finding its way back. Agnes and Eleanor, their own eyes bright with emotion, stood side by side, watching the quiet interaction. They exchanged a knowing, satisfied smile. The legacy of pain had been confronted, and from its ashes, a new legacy, one of hope, resilience, and purposeful action, was being forged by the generation they had nurtured. As the last guests departed and the hall grew quiet, the first rays of a new dawn began to filter through the tall windows, bathing the scene in a soft, promising light. The numbers, Grace knew, would always continue to tell their stories, but now she was helping to write equations of hope, with constants of love and truth guiding every calculation. What do you think about this story? Was it just disturbing, or did it make you feel something deeper? I'd love to hear your thoughts, your emotions, your perspective, so please, leave a comment below and let's talk about it. If stories like this move you, shock you, or make you reflect, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you for watching, and here's a little gift from me waiting in tomorrow's story. No one saw it coming. A rich man in a tailored gray suit walks calmly across an empty bridge with a little girl in a pink dress, his daughter. Her cries slice through the silence, her tiny hands clutching his, begging him to stop. And then he lifts her over the railing, not in a moment of rage, but with a chilling, practiced calm. "You ruined everything," he whispers and lets go. What he doesn't know is that someone or something was watching. A white horse, regal and ghost-like, stands frozen in the distance, sensing what no human could. Seconds later, it charges. What happens next is not just miraculous, it's unthinkable. But it begs the question, what drives a father to silence his own daughter? And how far can innocence run before the past catches up?